Parents of Reddit, what were you not prepared for when raising a child? Babies are hairy when they are first born. My beautiful daughter came out and looked like Donkey Kong the first day. I was like, dang, she's gonna have a hard time in high school. Seriously. I thought my little boy looked like a gorilla. He had a full head of hair along with hairy ears and back. This, coupled with the fact that there was goo smooshed in his hair that we couldn't wash for 2 days, meant that he definitely wasn't as cute as he could have been. We came to the hospital with 2 pieces of brown felt to use as baby sideburns. We were going to take a photo of my husband, who's had sideburns since high school, with his brand new baby daughter and her sideburns, and caption it, "No paternity test needed." Turns out, she was born with her very own sideburns, so we didn't need fake ones. Our daughter looks like somebody used an app to make a baby face from a photo of my husband. Don't forget about baby erections. Very unsettling. Yes, my little girl had dark hair on the tops of her ears until she was about 4 months old. How much and how quickly they become their own unique person, both like and totally unlike their parents. You think you're going to be raising a version of yourself, but nope. You have to figure out how to parent someone totally new. 100% this. Especially unsettling when they have a strong personality that you just don't get. Both like and totally unlike their parents. I think they'll swing back and become more like their parents as they enter mid to late 20s, at least that's what I've observed in myself and my siblings. Once they grow enough to realize, hey, I'm not the center of the universe and I shouldn't expect anything, a shift occurs where they mirror their parents' values. It seems like every day now, my sister or a brother says something that is like mom or dad remote controlling them. The anxiety that came with him going to school. He's been bullied, doesn't have many male friends, isn't very athletic, etc. I take comfort in the fact that he does have good friends, he's passionate about being a school librarian, in the media team and being a part of the orchestra. He's starting to be more confident and he stays out of trouble. But God, it hurts so much when he's sad or upset or gets anxious in social situations. That lack of ability to protect and beat up snot-nosed kids does cause uncomfortable moments. He's passionate about being a school librarian. Now I have to go to the hospital because my heart just melted. You can have twins without a family history. I have identical twin girls, the ultrasound showed one. I brought up to the doctor that I feel 2 babies kicking before he said, that's because it has 2 legs. In delivery when I heard, there's another one. I wasn't actually in much shock. That doesn't inspire a whole lot of faith in that doctor. Fraternal twins are generally something hereditary since it requires that your body release 2 eggs at once and this is a trait you can pass on. But identical twins are just spontaneous, just the fertilized egg deciding on its own to split. Source, both my husband and I have multiple sets of twins in our family, so when we got pregnant last year I did some research. Spoiler, we only had 1 baby. Wait, hold up, stop everything. You're telling me that it's 2019 and doctors can miss an entire baby in the womb? Surprise twins are an actual thing? Just how fast they hit puberty. I was a teenager when it started with me, my kids were both 10. And how damn early they learn about sex and all sorts of things, mostly misinformation from their friends too. Expressionless face, you go to have the talk with them and they're like, yeah, we already know this, and you're like, what? The anxiety that comes from the thought of saying or doing the wrong thing. You are going to be most of the reason they are the way they are when they're older. They totally depend on you to help them through everything and they don't even know it. I am pretty much constantly afraid that I'm handling things poorly, that I could be doing better for my kid but don't know how. It's rough sometimes. I constantly think I'm a terrible parent. It's really stressful, trying to do everything right and trying to raise a decent human being. How unrelenting and constant it is. First they don't sleep, then when they can move on their own they have no sense and you have to watch them constantly, then there are sometimes a few years before they start having really difficult stresses and problems that you have to help them negotiate, then they're old enough to have adult-sized problems that as a parent you really want to help them with if only you could change the world for them. It's possible to parent a little less intensely, but then you run the risk of their resenting you for it because you did a half-assed job. The days when you could send your kids out to play and not know where they are until dinner time are over unless you want a visit from CPS. Which is fine and good, but it's just plain harder and more constant work than it used to be. And even with all that effort, there's no way to protect them from internal or external sources of pain. And as a parent, however well-intentioned, you can even become one of those sources of pain if you say the wrong thing at a critical time or fail to understand what your child is going through and leave them on their own to struggle at a time when they really need a cuddle. And don't forget having to be a child psychiatrist and trying to empathize and encourage without leaping in to solve their problems for them or minimizing what they're going through. Or walking the tightrope between teaching discipline and being controlling. My kids turned out to be utterly fantastic and super easy and didn't get into any trouble along the way. I had it so much easier than pretty much any of my friends did. I'd do it again, but it's so much harder than I thought it would be. All of this. My kids are under 5, but this is already so much more overwhelming than I anticipated. And as a natural worrier, I'm already freaking out about the next stages, then teens and young adults, and what if I'm totally ruining their lives already? How much time and energy I'd have to put in to keep them from killing themselves. 2 teens, aged 14 and 18. Anxiety, depression, panic attacks, medications, therapists, hospitalizations, 2 suicide attempts. Trying to help them with this has been a huge part of our lives in the last 2 years. I think we have a pretty normal, happy household. Husband and I happily married for 21 years, middle class, lots of love and laughter and support in our house. Yet our children are really struggling. Anxious face with sweat. It's hard being a teen now. I have fun memories of being in high school and I wanted that same experience for them. It was a real surprise to realize how dark things are for them. I was prepared for sleepless nights and terrible twos and all that. No one prepared me for this. Keep fighting for them. I told my ex I was suicidal and got a lecture on how we couldn't afford therapy, plenty of cash for high-end computers and games though, and after an attempt it was all about, how could you do this to me? Having parents give a shut if you live or die can protect them and help them avoid the relationship mistakes I made just because I wanted to be wanted. The urgency of everything. I need to pee means, I felt the urge 20 plus minutes ago but was busy playing, now I'm about to pee my pants. I'm hungry means, my mood and behavior has progressively gotten worse for the last hour and you haven't noticed. If you don't feed me now I'm going full exorcist. I need help with homework means, I got an assignment months ago but I didn't want to do it, it's half my grade and is due tomorrow. Everything is urgent because children are the worst procrastinators in the world. Chronic lack of sleep. My brain function plummeted for the first couple years with each kid. I was brain foggy and volatile. It felt like I was sacrificing things that I didn't know I could sacrifice when I signed up for this, and it took a long time to adapt. I would absolutely do it all again, but it was hard. And on top of lack of sleep was the crash into postnatal depression. It was like being out of my mind, crying all the time at the smallest thing, the hours spent trying to get baby to bed only for them to start crying 10 minutes later. I was hitting my head against the wall, literally. To make it stop. When you're in it you think it will never stop, it feels so endless. We went to sleep school, I got medication and counseling but it took until after 12 months until it got better. My baby was born, then about a week later was teething, then a week later was sitting up and crawling, then a week later was cruising, and now she is trying to stand and take her first steps. It has actually been 9 months, but I swear to God it has only been these few couple weeks. Time just flies by so fast. If I didn't have video to prove that I was cuddling a little scrunch-faced potato all those months ago I would have sworn on my life she hadn't grown almost at all, but she is nearly triple the size. The days are long, but the years are short. I'm gonna be honest here. I'm a single dad and only have the one. I got lucky. Super lucky. My 5-year-old is a goddamn rock star. From 6 months on he slept his nights through, never cried, eats everything, bedtime is a breeze every single night. It's almost like he's too perfect to be real. That's 99% of the time. There are the very rare days where it's almost like a switch flips and he just has the worst day. These are incredibly rare though and getting rarer. Usually it comes after a poor night's sleep. I guess for me personally the biggest thing I wasn't ready for was the sudden and polarizing change. Times I want to ask myself, who is this kid? We didn't even have the nursery set up yet when my oldest was born. My husband was working like crazy to get extra hours so he could take 2 weeks off for the birth, and my parents were planning on coming out the next week to help set up the nursery and everything. Then I went into labor 6 weeks early and had to have an emergency C-section. Also, the projectile poop. I was definitely not expecting the violent, shoot all the way across the room and splat the wall like a power washer projectile poop that newborns have. The sharts are my favorite thing. Our newborn has the loudest sharts. Like, grown man-sized farts, but wetter. The purpose of your life becomes very simple yet endlessly stressful. I think what shocked me was how my job became accidental suicide watch 24/7. Not a joke. Children don't know anything and have very little comprehension of danger or risk. Even after falling 100 times and hitting their heads on things that are very obviously in their way also 100 times, they continue essentially the same behavior, which is to be somewhat oblivious to their surroundings. Now daycare, where in my first week, the teacher covering from the actual daycare staff was found passed out on the ground next to my daughter, who was soaked in piss crying because she was embarrassed about trying to go potty, never has accidents, and when my ex woke her up, it was nap time, she blamed my daughter. I'm surprised that woman is still alive after she said that to her mother only the third day of daycare. Anyway, now I have to worry about other people who care a lot less about her to take care of her. It's lovely. That if we split, it would break me. Weren't my kids. I was prepared for everything. I read baby and parenting books non-stop for 9 months. I've had insomnia my whole life, so not sleeping wasn't gonna be an issue. I wasn't prepared for the traumatic birth. He got stuck on my wife's pelvis and they nearly had to do an emergency bedside C-section, but they got him out. My wife was pouring blood, he was barely moving, the whole room was chaos with nurses and doctors everywhere. He was having trouble breathing and they kept him in the nursery overnight to monitor him. He had nerve damage in his right arm from being stuck and he could barely move it at first. It was a rough experience. Then 2 weeks later we find 2 small blisters on him. Take him to the doctor and they run a test and find out he has HSV-1. Most people have it by adulthood, but it can be fatal to babies, so we had to rush back to the hospital where he spent 3 weeks in the NICU getting treated. Wasn't prepared for that either. How many fights I would have to put up with from adults. All these people who know what's best for you and your kid, willing to go to batshit crazy over it. Toddler diarrhea. This is when your toddler has diarrhea, and you've been to the pediatrician multiple times, and they've been tested for all the food allergies, and you've had to take a stool sample to get checked for all kinds of parasites that could possibly be causing it, only to have everything come back negative and have the pediatrician tell you that some toddlers get massive diarrhea for months and there's no explanation, and here's some prescription burn cream to use instead of regular diaper cream because the rash really is that bad even though the diaper is changed far more often than average. Someone told me, when I was pregnant, that having a child is like having your heart walking around outside your body, and it really is true. I fear bad things happening to him far more than I fear bad things happening to me. When I had my first baby, I was completely unprepared for the loss of autonomy. It's something no one told me about or mentioned in any way. The feeling is profound and I grieved over it. You go from being your own person physically and mentally, but after a baby you're physically and mentally tied to the most needy and helpless of creatures. Things like running to the grocery store aren't simple anymore. It gets easier the older they get, but I'm guessing it never truly goes away, because even when they move out I'll still worry about them. The worry. Red, green, and yellow poop.